Hello, in this short video, we're going to cover how in the farm carbon calculator you can enter inventory items and understand the impact of those capital items on your farm. So they operate slightly differently to the rest of the calculator. I'll explain how to go through the process. So I set up a test report here on the farm carbon calculator. You should be familiar now with how to log in and set up your report. On the left-hand side here, click on the inventory tab. And as it explains here, it's about capital items such as machinery and buildings or large projects you do on the farm, and they're depreciated over 10 years because the carbon impact of these is quite significant. And although the emissions happen in year zero, we allow them to be depreciated over 10 years to spread the impact of those projects, and also to show that actually it's really important to keep some of these the machinery and the buildings going for as long as possible because they are such high impact carbon items. Okay, so there's several different types here. You obviously start by clicking the Add New button, and there'll be a list of things that come up. So we'll start off with something fairly simple. So we'll go to Farm Machinery, and we'll click a tractor. In this example, we're going to label them because you might have more than one tractor on the farm. So we'll call this John Deere 1 or whatever reference makes sense. So we need to know the horsepower. So we're going to say the 100 horsepower, and we'll say the year in which it was either bought from, well, the year in which it was built. Okay, that's really, really important. So if you bought it, but it's already 10 years old, you don't need to enter it. But we'll say this was a 2015 tractor. And then we'll click save. Just know that if you've sold this item, you can go back through your archive and you can say, right, that's sold. It's now no longer on my archive, and it's kind of sold to somebody else. So those emissions are removed. So we'll click save, and then that'll take us back to the inventory tab, where it will work out the emissions of that tractor. So here we are listed here. So it's listed as 4.4 tons a year for a 100 horsepower tractor, which means the real impact is 44 tons of CO2. Let's say they're very big impact items, these tractors, but we're depreciating it over 10 years. Because it's a 2015 tractor, by the time you get to year 2025, that will actually be cleaned from your inventory, and it'll end up here below in this inventory archive. So you'll be able to see your older machinery or buildings or whatever, but they will actually have effectively zero emissions on your inventory. Okay, so we'll do a slightly more complicated one now on a building. So if there's an item that isn't listed in the drop-down menu here, so we've got vehicles, machinery, implements, agricultural buildings. But if you want to create your own, let's say we're going to do a polytunnel. Okay, so you click custom. Now just look at this process carefully, because this needs a little bit of you need to work through this quite carefully. So custom, so we're going to call this polytunnel. We'll call it polytunnel 1, in fact, and we'll say this was put up in year 2020. Okay, again, same thing if you click solve. So this is effectively creating an item. So we'll save that, and it'll go back to the inventory. There's no emissions associated yet because we've got to add the materials to that. So custom items, you create the item, then you add the materials. So if we scroll down, there's the tractor. Down here is the polytunnel. So as you see, at the minute, 0 tons of CO2e. If you need to edit the details so that you can click edit here or delete it. Same with the tractors or whatever else. Okay, so this polytunnel, we need to add materials. So we click on the Add Materials tab, and it will give us a list of materials. If we click the drop down, scroll down to the bottom, inventory, glass houses and polytunnels. This is pre-populated with some polytunnel items. So we'll start off with the frame. Sorry, it's got easiest way is by width. So if you know the width of your polytunnel, and we're going to say this is a big 9 meter wide polytunnel, and then we need to know the length of it. So let's say it's a 30 meter tunnel. So this will automatically calculate the embodied energy in the frame of the tunnel, so the metalwork effectively. But of course, we also need to add on the plastic. So we'll go back into this to add materials. Same thing again. We'll go down to the bottom of the list. Glass houses and polytunnels. Polytunnel cover. Then we can select type. So we'll say this is the big 14-meter wide type. And we said 30 meters, so it's going to be a little bit more for the end. So we'll say 36 meters of plastic. We'll click on save. And that will then add it to the polytunnel item. Okay. So we scroll down. Here we are. So these two have now added together. And we know the total per year for this polytunnel is 0.19 tons of CO2e, which means the total is 1.9 tons of CO2e for the whole structure, but we're dividing it by 10. And of course, you probably would want to add some timber to that as well if you've got some timber in the structure. So anyway, you can do that. So that effectively is how you go through adding items into the inventory. I'll do one more example and make a little comparison here with the materials page. So for an example of a project where you're using a lot of steel, and in this item, I'm just going to call it steel structure. And I just want to compare to what the impact of adding it to the materials page. Okay, so in a sense, you have to choose where to put the item, whether to put it into materials or into inventory. For tractors and buildings and big structures, it's obvious. For other things, you might have to use your judgment. So here we are, steel structure. And what I'm going to do is add in 5 tons of steel here, because I want to just compare it to the impact on the materials page. Okay, so we'll go up to metalwork, and we're going to say this is steel. And we've got a choice. We're going to say it's steel plate. I'm going to have 5 tons. Okay. So we'll save that and see what the impact is. And of course, you could add any sorts of materials in here. So you might do like a major, as it says here, like a major fencing job or water installations. You want to effectively capitalize it to avoid the massive emissions in 1 year, the big hit. Okay, so we've got steel, 1.23 tons of CO2e, so that's spread over 10 years. If we go to the materials tab, I've already populated it with some steel. And as you can see, 1 year is 12.3 tons of CO2e for the 5 tons of steel. So that just shows how the inventory divides things by 10. So effectively, think of the inventory like you would in accounting terms. It's a way of depreciating the capital cost, in this case, the carbon cost of large items over 10 years. Hopefully that's really clear and will help you to fill in that inventory tab and make a bit more sense of the calculator.